The final entry to Disney Star Wars The Mandalorian releases this year, and looking at the reactions from general audiences, I don't think I've seen the cultural consensus on a TV show drop this quickly since the infamous finale of HBO's Dragon Lady series. You know the one. Less than half a decade ago, The Mandalorian was almost universally praised by critics and fans as an overdue return to form for Star Wars, a breath of fresh air for a sci-fi franchise which had grown insultingly stale. But fast forward to the release of its third season and upcoming standalone movie, and I think it's safe to say that feelings have changed. Even now, I'm not exactly sure where the backlash came from, whether it was the terrible fight scenes, lackluster special effects, surprise flautist cameos, or simply general audience fatigue from the endless stream of mediocre franchise entries that defines the Disney Plus business model. But ultimately, the specific reason doesn't matter. This spectacular fall from grace was inevitable from the start. Because while the internet seems to have collectively decided that the latest Mandalorian season was awful, the reality is the show has been bad from the very beginning. And sure, whilst this overly dramatic statement might sound like typical snobby contrarianism, stick around and I'll prove it to you, by showing how the infamous issues that ruined audience enjoyment of Season 3 have crippled the series since Season 1, starting all the way back in the very first episode. Looking back, arguably the largest contributing factor to The Mandalorian's positive reception was the cultural environment surrounding its release. Its first episode premiered roughly 11 months after the release of the most controversial movie in Star Wars history, with many fans feeling dissatisfied with the direction of the franchise's main storyline and eager for content unrelated to the characters or plot of the more recent entries. A standalone series exploring aspects of the setting not oversaturated with lightsabers while introducing a new cast of interesting looking characters seemed to be the fresh start the franchise desperately needed. But despite its popular reception, a closer look at the series' story structure and character writing reveals some critical issues that start all the way back in the very first scene. Season 1, Episode 1 of The Mandalorian opens with our mysterious protagonist travelling to a remote bar in a frozen wasteland to capture and retrieve an alien fugitive. It's a strong premise which immediately hooks the viewers with dramatic atmosphere and dynamic action scenes while also introducing an initially compelling main character. But unfortunately, this scene also introduces an insidious plot device that will seriously impact the storytelling quality going forward. This thing. Later in the episode it's referred to as a tracking fob, and from the way it's shown to the audience, it provides the user an exact position of their target anywhere in the galaxy, including their proximity. It might sound like a harmless inclusion, but the information this gadget provides for the characters essentially removes any potential for interesting conflict. Now, it might sound like I'm making a big deal out of a tiny detail, exaggerating the damage of what ultimately amounts to a minor writing decision. But the consequences of introducing these gadgets immediately start to appear in the following plot of the episode and continue to affect the rest of the season. After delivering his bounty to the guild, the Mandalorian, later named Din Djarin, immediately requests more work from the guild leader Greef Karga. Karga eventually gives Mando the contact for a highly secretive mission, with the client being the remnants of a galactic empire led by guest appearance Werner Herzog. To maintain secrecy and build suspense for the audience, the client explains that the only information they can provide Mando is a tracking fob, after which he leaves the planet and immediately travels to his new destination. This is where the problems start. Now, with what the audience knows about tracking fobs, Mando could easily fly straight to his destination in his personal starship. But TV episodes are supposed to be 40 minutes long, so instead he lands about 5 kilometers away from his real target so an NPC can deliver a side quest. Mando is told the path to his destination is inaccessible by foot, a fact which is contradicted in the first scene of the next episode. Instead, he needs to fill the runtime belonging to ride a funny creature instead of just flying there like he should have 10 minutes ago. This is only the first episode, and the obvious problems of tracking fobs are already seriously affecting the story. They trivialize the actual process of bounty hunting into basic fetch quests, so the writers need to pad for time by artificially inserting conflict into the narrative. Instead of watching the protagonist track down their target by using their skill set to trace them from former contacts or known residences, the tracking fobs remove all the challenge by constantly providing them with a location of their target. This destroys opportunities for dramatic stakes since the protagonist has no problems he has to overcome. The only way to force tension into these episodes is to insert random enemies to block their path, a lazy trick the writers consistently rely on across the entire show. It's the writing equivalent of a quest marker in a bad open world game. Just go in this direction and kill everyone who gets in your way until you get your reward. The problems only get worse when Mando arrives at his destination and discovers his cargo is guarded by a small group of mercenaries. But luckily, another fan favourite ripoff character has arrived to help, a bounty hunter droid named IG-11. Yeah, apparently this super secret job for an underground organisation was actually such common knowledge that in episode 3, Grief Karga confirms that the entire bounty hunting guild knew about it.
There is one job.
Let's see the puck.
No puck. Face to face. Direct commission. Deep pocket.
Underworld.
All I know is no chain code.
How many of them had tracking fobs?
All of them. All of them!
Consistency isn't a thing, guys, don't worry about it. With just 2 bounty hunters and the power of bad fight choreography, Mando and IG-11 defeat the mercenaries and the mysterious identity of the cargo is revealed. A brand new mascot from Disney's marketing department.
Merchandising, merchandising! Where the real money from the movie is made. Spaceballs the t-shirt. Spaceballs the coloring book. Spaceballs the lunchbox. Spaceballs the breakfast cereal. Spaceballs the flamethrower! The kids love this one.
By the time Mando has finally delivered his cargo to the Empire, the audience has another question which highlights yet another problem with tracking fobs. If the Empire is giving all these tracking fobs to random bounty hunters, why don't they just do the job themselves? Seriously, the tracking fobs already give the Empire the exact location of the mascot, and they clearly have enough soldiers to get the job done. Staying anonymous obviously isn't an issue since they've already revealed themselves to every bounty hunter in the guild, and they're willing to invade an entire city in the finale, so why don't they just get the cargo themselves? See, typically the job of a bounty hunter is to track down and capture or kill a target the client doesn't have the information or resources to manage instead. But in a setting with tiny devices that can easily give you the exact location of your target, what's the point of hiring a bounty hunter as anything more than a hitman? If you already have a tracking fob, you could probably just buy a gun, hire a spacesuit, and go do the job yourself for a lot less money. So this show about bounty hunters just destroyed any logical reason for bounty hunters to exist as a profession, in the first shot of the first scene of the first episode. People think this season is the good one. Of course, it should be highlighted that the introduction of tracking fobs is just one symptom of a larger problem with The Mandalorian, which is that the scriptwriters have no idea how to generate or develop conflict. See, all the problems the fobs cause could eventually be fixed if they were addressed correctly, and they could even provide some interesting opportunities for plot developments if they were fleshed out more. But as the series continues, it becomes obvious this is just an issue with the script writing in general, since even the episodes where the tracking fobs are absent have the exact same problems of filler and plot contrivance. In my previous plot synopsis, I actually completely skipped the content of an entire episode because it had no impact on the overall story, but it still deserves an analysis because it's so symbolic of all the problems of this show. The story goes as follows. Mando returns to his ship with the mascot puppet only to discover that Jawas have raided it for parts. After an extensive confrontation, it becomes clear that Mando can't leave without the parts the Jawas stole, and he can't get them back without giving the Jawas something in return. They ask him to retrieve the egg of a random creature, forcing him to complete a dangerous side quest leading to a mandated action scene, which shows off more of his equipment as well as the mascot's force abilities. After killing the animal and taking its egg, the Jawas give Mando his parts back and let him continue with the main storyline. And that's the whole episode. The Jawas just appear out of nowhere to cause problems for the main character. Mando's ship is completely back to normal by the end with no consequences moving forward. The entire episode is spent dealing with a random chance encounter that's completely unrelated to the rest of the season. For an obvious comparison, look at how much better the Jawas were used in the first Star Wars movie, and how essentially they were integrated into the overall plot. In Star Wars 1977, the Jawas are first introduced when they kidnap R2-D2 and C-3PO after the droids crash land on Tatooine with the Death Star plans the Empire are looking for. They eventually sell the robots to the Lars family, but afterwards their moving fortress is attacked by Imperial troops looking for the Death Star plans the droids are carrying. When the stormtroopers check the sales records, they trace the droids back to Luke's family and execute them as potential rebel sympathizers, which gives Luke a personal motivation to deliver the plans to the rebels as justice for his aunt and uncle. So despite playing a smaller role with a fraction of the screen time, the Jawas have a major impact on the events and characters and serve as an essential part of the overall storyline. In The Mandalorian, the Jawas completely disappear from the narrative after Mando trades in the egg, and none of their actions have any effect on the characters or events going forward. You could completely cut them out of the overall storyline and nothing would change, as proven by my earlier plot summary. The difference between these approaches is important because it perfectly demonstrates the main problem of The Mandalorian scriptwriting: contrivance. Unlike A New Hope, the Jawas don't emerge as a part of any ongoing plot threads or established world building, and their encounter with Mando has no further relevance on the rest of the season. So it's pretty clear they were only included as a random obstacle for the protagonist to overcome on his journey back home, the scriptwriters inserting them to pad the runtime. Now, this wouldn't be such a big deal as an isolated incident, but unfortunately, this episode is the beginning of a pattern the show only repeats more as it progresses. It goes something like this. Mando arrives in a new location looking for something. His quest gets him caught up in random local conflict, either through accident or someone offering the item in exchange for his help. He ends the conflict, saving the day, gets what he needs for the next part of his quest, then moves on to the next episode to repeat the same process. Again, this formula is a pretty clear example of lazy scriptwriting, with the random encounters providing easy opportunities to insert conflict. Instead of developing existing plot threads while slowly raising the stakes across the season, the constant side quests only exist to throw problems at the protagonist and fill the runtime. A lazy way to create drama without meaningful story progression. Now, before you type anything, yes, I do know what episodic storytelling is. But this isn't a new story every episode. This is the same story repeated every episode, and the formula so generic that even general audiences notice the trend by the middle of season 2.
Oh no, we can't do our mission because we're out of milk. Guess we better get some at this new planet.
By far the laziest version of this trend is when the writers don't know how a scene should progress, so they just insert a random space monster into the setting to force drama. This usually happens whenever the writers want to interrupt a confrontation between main characters, and the implications are always hilarious. In Season 3, the Mandalorian's main camp is attacked twice by giant monsters which are apparently just a feature of the local wildlife. You gotta wonder how many foundlings have to be eaten by Dusk Kindershredder before these guys finally decide to pack up and live somewhere else. The first episode of Season 2 features a small town the residents built right next to a giant sandworm nest for some reason, and make their living by farming the only animals these sandworms eat. You can probably guess how well that works out for them. Now, it shouldn't be any surprise that this trope also started in Season 1, but what you might not expect is that it actually appears in the very first episode. After capturing his target, Mando escorts his captive back to his ship, which he parked in the only spaceport in the galaxy where your vehicle can be attacked by Arctic sea serpents. This is apparently such a common problem that his taxi driver actually warns the travelers he escorts there.
I'd stay off the ice if I were you.
Of course, he gets eaten anyway because the entire planet is made of ice, making his advice useless. It bears repeating that every problem with The Mandalorian people complained about in Season 3 has made the show bad since the very start. This show has never been good. Would you like to hear how it gets worse? So far, most of my criticisms have focused on The Mandalorian's myriad of structural issues, but it's time we shifted focus to an arguably more important area: character writing. Because while all these scriptwriting problems are definitely important, they aren't the only reason the show fails. As proven time and time again, people are usually willing to overlook general inconsistencies in plot writing as long as the character arcs are solid. So while I could continue to exhaustively break down every problem with every episode, these world-building errors and plot holes are arguably less important than how the show handles its characters and their respective journeys. So why don't we start with the protagonist? Let's rewind back to the start of episode 1. After his dramatic introduction in the tavern just before travelling to his ship at the spaceport, Din Djarin has an interaction with a local which features his first real moment of characterization. While organising transport back to his ship, Din Djarin specifically refuses the clearly safer vehicle because it has a droid pilot, showing an attitude towards robots that's pretty rare in this setting, at least within the main characters.
Hey, we don't serve their kind here.
What?
Your droids, they'll have to wait outside. We don't want them here.
Now, this might sound inconsequential, but this moment stands out as the first decision the protagonist makes which is clearly informed by his unique values. Mando's distrust of droids is the first thing we learn about his character besides his temperament and profession. And this trait is developed further after his meeting with the Empire when he returns with his payment to a hidden group of Mandalorians, the clan which raised him since he was a child. He presents his reward to the leader, which is revealed to be Beskar steel, an ancestral metal sacred to Mandalorian culture with extremely high durability. She congratulates him on this success and states that this metal will help grow their clan by providing equipment to new foundlings.
This is extremely generous. The excess will sponsor many foundlings.
That's good. I was once a foundling.
I know.
Clunky exposition aside, the following flashback is an unironically strong development for Mando's characterization. We learn that Din Djarin's parents were killed during a separatist invasion during the Clone Wars, and later discover it was the Mandalorians who rescued him from the droid attack, which effectively contextualizes two things. One, his devotion to the Mandalorians as a family who rescued him from certain death, and two, his hatred of droids as an orphan of war at the hands of an army of robots. I have no idea why this battle droid was programmed to actively hunt down random civilians, but otherwise, this is pretty solid stuff. Things really start to get interesting later in the episode when Din Djarin and IG-11 discover the child Grogu after defeating the bandits. In a scene which deliberately parallels a flashback, Mando stops the assassin droid from killing the target, clearly sympathetic towards Grogu having once been in a similar situation. Once again, plot details aside, this is a pretty satisfying development for Mando's character, a payoff which logically uses his established values and motivations for dramatic effect. Nothing spectacular, but still, it works. So far, Din Djarin's character writing has been pretty serviceable, with logical through lines leading to relevant payoffs. So what went wrong? Well, to put it simply, episode 3 happened. To quickly recap, Mando's job is to deliver this child to the Empire, which will almost certainly mean its death. But in exchange, he'll be rewarded with an important cultural material that will greatly benefit his tribe. Essentially, Mando has to choose between his personal sympathies and his devotion to his tribe. It's an interesting inner conflict with the potential for great character development. He then proceeds to make the worst decision possible. Mando ultimately delivers a child to the Empire in exchange for the Beskar, which he takes back to his clan. And after being rewarded with a set of laser-proof armor, he changes his mind and decides to storm the Imperial hideout and rescue Grogu. To be clear, this is basically the worst decision he could have made, both pragmatically and thematically. Pragmatically, Grogu could have easily been killed before Mando came back to rescue him, but the only reason he's still alive when Mando arrives is thanks to Dr. Pershing.
What did you do to it?
I protected him. I protected him. If it wasn't for me, he would already be dead, please.
Furthermore, this rescue attempt ultimately endangers his whole clan, as they publicly expose themselves while rescuing Mando, making them enemies of the Empire and the Bounty Hunter Guild. Thematically, this decision means that Mando's values are never actually challenged, and his internal conflict is never resolved. So to recap, Mando had to choose between helping his clan and saving a child. Now, thanks to his indecision, his entire clan is in danger and Grogu is only alive by sheer luck. To put it bluntly, it's a complete fuck-up. This is especially disappointing from a scriptwriting perspective since they had a genuinely interesting opportunity to explore a conflict between their protagonist's established values. Instead, they made him seemingly betray these values while giving him literal plot armor as a reward for his mistakes. Seriously, this stuff is like indestructible. It turns every action scene afterwards into a joke. Now, this could still be improved if the story took the time to really examine the implications of these events and the consequences of his actions over the rest of the season, but as the season progresses, it seems like neither Mando or the scriptwriters actually understand the significance of what happened. Mando never has to reconcile how his actions have permanently endangered the people who raised him, or how his indecision nearly cost Grogu his life. He doesn't seem to suffer from any visible guilt, at least nothing that clearly informs his actions going forward, and the whole incident is forgotten as quickly as the Jawa side quest. The only scene that even begins to address the impact of these events is in the season finale, where Mando returns to find the remains of his clan's armor sitting in their abandoned hideout. But weirdly enough, Mando immediately blames Greef Karga for this incident, seemingly unaware that the Mandalorians are only wanted fugitives due to his actions in episode 3.
You know about this? Is this the work of your bounty hunters?
No. When you left the system and took the prize, the fighting ended, and the hunters just melted away.
Did you do this? Did you?
No!
Furthermore, the leader, who just decided to stick around, I guess, tells him that these clan members didn't die, they just abandoned the creed for their own safety. Which really undercuts the dramatic stakes of the earlier climax in a way that minimizes any personal consequences for Mando's character. The main issue here is that Mando's personal values and unique character traits are rarely explored through his decisions or actions over the course of a series, and the rare occasions when his values are explored somehow end up undermining his established traits and motivations, which makes it incredibly difficult for the audience to become invested in his character. In episode 1, Mando was introduced as a cool-looking bounty hunter with a mysterious personality. But by the season finale, nothing's really changed because the scriptwriters haven't bothered to develop anything for his character outside of his attachment to Grogu. Like, what's his perspective on bounty hunting? How does he feel about the rise and fall of the Empire? Despite having countless opportunities to explore these questions during the season, the show never actually seems interested in ever fleshing out its main character. Which is a real pity since, again, this series was a perfect opportunity to develop aspects of a Star Wars universe outside of the main film series, and Mando's perspective on the setting could be an ideal way to explore it. But speaking of Grogu, I think it's time we switch focus to discuss his character writing, or lack thereof. Now, ask any diehard fan of The Mandalorian, and I think most would cite the dynamic between Din Djarin and Grogu as the show's main appeal. It's definitely what they center all the marketing around. But it's worth noting that despite being the series' focal point, this relationship is kinda one-sided. Grogu doesn't really have that much of a personality, which makes sense since he's an infant, but this only makes you wonder why that creative decision was even made. See, typically the point of any character dynamic is to contrast characters with different views and personalities to watch them grow and develop as they interact. But you can't really do that when your other character isn't old enough to talk. Grogu doesn't have any views or personalities since he isn't even old enough to develop any, and his species' lifespan means he can't learn anything from Mando over the course of the series either. It's a seriously missed opportunity, especially since his age and maturity seem like they were only chosen for the surprise twist in episode 1 and the obvious marketing potential. By the way, I did the math, Yoda is only 800 years old in The Empire Strikes Back, so if Grogu was an infant at age 50, then Yoda died of old age when he was a teenager. Puberty must hit hard and fast for these guys. Again, the problem with making Grogu a perpetual infant is that it removes any opportunity for meaningful development or interesting dialogue from his interactions with Din Djarin. And for an obvious comparison, just look at the core dynamic of Ellie and Joel from the TV adaptation of The Last of Us. What makes their journey so compelling is the way their relationship develops as Ellie's youthful enthusiasm and curiosity about the world is contrasted by Joel's cynical experience with it. By sharing and exchanging ideas over the course of a season, Ellie learns important wisdom and survival skill from Joel, while Joel's cynical worldview is challenged by his investment in Ellie's safety. It's a simple, endearing character dynamic, but the whole thing wouldn't work if Ellie was too young to have formed a perspective or to learn from Joel's advice. So by making Grogu an infant, the story loses any potential narrative satisfaction from watching him grow and develop during his time traveling with Mando. Instead, most of his screen time is taken up by generic, cute baby scenes to increase his appeal as Disney's new mascot. So yeah, Grogu as a character really doesn't have anything going on outside of his significance to Mando, and unfortunately, this dynamic is never really expanded upon either. Even though Mando has effectively adopted a parental role for this infant, the series almost never seems interested in exploring how this responsibility has affected Mando as a person. I mean, after almost leaving Grogu to die and getting his whole clan publicly endangered trying to rescue him, you'd think Mando would spend the rest of the series incredibly invested in Grogu's well-being. But if anything, Mando seems surprisingly neglectful towards Grogu, entrusting him to a mechanic he's only known for a few minutes in episode 5 and leaving him barely hidden on a ship full of bounty hunters in episode 6.
You can't just leave a child all alone like that. You know, you have an awful lot to learn about raising a young one.
Ultimately, despite all the sacrifices Din Djarin made for him, Grogu's presence never seems to actually influence Mando's decisions in any way. Grogu seems more like an accessory than an important part of Mando's life, and their whole dynamic feels like a lazy attempt to cash into prominent entertainment trends. Like, I know the lone wolf and cub archetype is popular, but you can't have a character dynamic without a character, you know? Alright, so the protagonist is boring at best, confusing at worst, and the deuteragonist only exists to sell t-shirts. This really isn't a great start as far as character writing goes, but unfortunately, things don't improve much outside the main cast either. Season 1 features a diverse array of cardboard cutouts, colourful enough to entertain the audience but shallow enough to write out of the later seasons without affecting the actual storyline. Most of them barely get an episode's worth of focus, but the few recurring characters suffer from the exact same problems as the main cast. Take Kuiil. Despite having the most screen time outside of Mando and Grogu, I wouldn't be surprised if none of you even remembered his name. He's the little old alien guy Mando miraculously bumped into back during the first episode, and when you look at how much his actions have impacted the story, it's shocking how little characterization he's received given his screen time. To recap, Kuiil was first introduced when he rescued Mando from the second random monster encounter in episode 1, after which he gives Mando the training he needs to complete the next part of his side quest while personally escorting him to the location of his target.
That is where you'll find your quarry.
After denying payment for his services and questioned why he would provide so much assistance, he explains,
Since these ones arrived, this territory has been an endless stream of mercenaries seeking reward and bringing destruction. Those that live here come to seek peace. There will be no peace until they're gone.
But the next time we see him, he tells Mando,
I thought you were dead.
Implying he assumed Mando would die storming the fortress. So, did he intentionally lead Mando into a death trap? Or did he actually want Mando to clear out the mercenaries and bring peace back to the region? Later in the episode, he provides translation services to help Mando bargain his ship parts back from the Jawas, then uses his engineering skills to help Mando repair his ship and continue his journey. So the only explanations that make sense are that this guy is either a shockingly helpful person, or he just really doesn't like Mando and will do anything to get him to leave. Jokes aside, the conversation they share after repairing the ship provides some more insight into Kuiil's personality and motivations. After Mando tries offering him payment, again, Kuiil denies, stating,
I cannot accept. You are my guest, and I am therefore in your service.
Implying that providing assistance to random strangers isn't just something he likes to do, helping travelers is actually an important part of his cultural values. Which makes it somehow even more convenient that Mando ran into the one person on the planet culturally obliged to help him when parking his ship in the middle of nowhere, but I digress. During their final exchange, Kuiil's response to Mando's employment offer hints at a deeper context behind his actions.
I could use a crew member of your ability, and I can pay handsomely.
I am honored, but I have worked a lifetime to finally be free of servitude.
But it isn't until his reappearance in episode 7 that this characterization is further developed. When Mando returns to ask for assistance in the finale, Kuiil reveals more of his personal history while explaining his experiences with the Empire.
Did you serve?
On the other side, I'm afraid. But I'm proud to say that I paid out my clan's debt, and now I serve no one but myself.
He also references this experience while explaining his motivation to help Mando protect Grogu from the Empire.
You trust me?
From what I can tell, yes.
Then you will trust my work. IG-11 will join me. And we do it not for payment, but to protect the child from Imperial slavery. Then we'll be free until the old ways are gone.
Now, at first glance, this seems like pretty consistent characterizing, with a character's backstory logically informing their decisions and motivations. But if you take a moment to reconsider Kuiil's previous actions in the story with the added context of his backstory, this new information completely changes the implications of their previous encounter. Because from what Kuiil just heard from Mando, his personal desire for peace nearly enabled the capture and enslavement of an innocent child at the hands of the Empire. To recap, Kuiil apparently retired on this planet for a peaceful life after finally earning his clan's freedom from institutional slavery under the Empire. In episode 2, the main reason he helped Mando take down the fortress and complete his mission was because the fortress attracted an endless stream of violent mercenaries who were disturbing the peace of his retirement. But what Kuiil didn't know is that the bounty hunters were actually sent by the Empire to capture and retrieve an innocent child. So by helping Mando earlier, his actions nearly directly enabled the capture of Grogu into the same slavery he spent most of his life trying to escape. Now, typically this type of realization would be an obvious opportunity for character development, with Kuiil's introspection giving him a more personal investment to protect Grogu. But much like Mando's indecision in episode 3, there's never actually a scene where Kuiil has to reconcile with the potential consequences of his choices. And this issue highlights the ultimate problem with the Mandalorian's character writing. Despite the glaring inconsistencies, neither of these characters ever have to reflect on their earlier decisions or previous events in a way which might challenge their values or motivations. The show seems consistently unwilling to acknowledge any discrepancies between its characters' beliefs and actions, and the most likely reason for this is that the scriptwriters are unaware these contradictions even exist in the first place. There's no consistency between the characters' behaviour across different episodes because there's no consideration for how their personalities will affect their actions. They just do whatever needs to happen to keep the plot moving forward. Which makes it impossible to really get invested in any of these characters because their actual character is almost never relevant to the story. The only superficial charm any of these characters have comes entirely from the performances of their talented actors, a fact that producers seem almost cynically aware of. Take Moff Gideon, played by Giancarlo Esposito, who is clearly typecasted as another shallow imitation of Gus Fring, a trend which has only gotten worse since the show's release. Entertainment executives have been relying on Esposito's association with this character as a substitute for writing their own villains for a while now, and while I wish I had more meaningful criticisms of Moff Gideon, there's honestly nothing really substantial to even dig into. We never get any scenes exploring his personality, origins, or motivation. He just shows up at the end of every season to give an evil villain speech, while bringing more goons with him each time to raise the stakes for the season finale. Like, what's his actual goal? Why does he still fight for the Empire? What drives him? 3 seasons in and we still don't have answers for any of these basic questions. He isn't a character, he's barely a plot device. Which feels almost disrespectful considering his brilliantly written inspiration and the emotional range of his talented actor. Seriously, check out his earlier work, he deserves better material. But again, this is the problem with every character in The Mandalorian. No matter how long we spend with these characters, the series never actually manages to develop them beyond their surface level personality traits. Despite having plenty of opportunities, the show never bothers to challenge and explore these characters' values and motivations, even in situations that would obviously demand some form of internal conflict or introspection. Because the scriptwriters simply weren't interested in ever expanding the cast beyond their popular or marketable archetypes, relying on their superficial appeal to keep the audience invested. And while you might try to excuse this lazy character writing with a series' limited runtime, there are plenty of other shows that achieve a lot more with a lot less. This is the point where I wanted to transition to a different topic, but honestly, there's really not much left to discuss. The cinematography and overall production started strong, but inevitably became over-reliant on digital effects. Season 1 saw the industry debut of the Volume, an immersive digital screen to display an array of convenient CGI backgrounds that none of the actors can actually interact with. A production decision which seriously affects the cinematography since the environment can't frame the composition. Pay attention to the backgrounds long enough and it becomes distracting just how much of the show takes place in conveniently flat open spaces. There's never anything in the foreground, none of these locations are real. Outside of a few indoor locations, they can barely manage a rudimentary shot-reverse shot. You'd think not having to shoot on location would be more convenient to schedule actors, but this show doesn't have a supporting cast to speak of, and by season 3, the main lead just stopped showing up on set entirely. I mean, who can blame him? It's not like he has an actual character to perform. The only thing left is the music, which... yeah, it's pretty good. Ludwig Göransson's original score is unironically some of the best music produced for this franchise in over a decade. A fact they seem to know since they blast the main character's theme music every time he appears on screen. Seriously, it gets pretty obnoxious. Which is honestly a pretty good summary of The Mandalorian. A strong initial concept which has been slowly watered down by incompetence over the course of several seasons. Less than half a decade ago, The Mandalorian was almost universally praised by Star Wars fans as an overdue return to form for this franchise. But while the series might have provided a refreshing contrast to the latest film entries, it hardly holds up when evaluated on its own merits. And while criticism of the show has definitely become more popular following the release of later seasons, it's important to recognise that all of these problems have been here since season 1. The series' scriptwriting has only gotten lazier, with the episodic fetch quest like episode 2's Jawa adventure quickly becoming the status quo. Even after tracking fobs were essentially abandoned as a plot device, along with bounty hunting as a profession. The disconnected storylines have made the series' continued reliance on contrivance impossible to ignore. The shallow characterization has only made it harder for audience members to remain invested in these characters' journeys, with even the most loyal fans feeling disappointed by the latest season. One of the most vocal complaints from fans during Season 3 was that Mando was kind of being written out of his own show, with most episodes focusing on returning character Bo-Katan and her mission to reunite the tribes of Mandalore on their home planet. But while a lot of fans attributed this focus shift to some kind of attempted emasculation, the simpler explanation is that unlike Mando, Bo-Katan is the only character with an actual motivation to drive the plot forward. The show's consistent refusal to characterize Mando and develop his personal motivations inevitably meant he'd run out of things to do and reasons to be in this story. The writers had no idea what to do with their blank slate action figures, so they just gave up and replaced him with a new to the existing character with actual goals and ambitions. Goals and ambitions which she achieved by the end of Season 3, so I really have no idea what their plan is going forward, and let's be honest, neither do they. In a 2023 interview with Entertainment, series showrunner Jon Favreau stated that he'd be happy to keep making seasons of this show for as long as the fans are watching. But less than a year later, Lucasfilm announced the release of the Mandalorian and Grogu spin-off movie, meant to provide a conclusion for all these characters and their story arcs. Which is funny since it implies these characters and events were ever actually building towards something, but more importantly, it really proves just how badly the audience's investment in this series has fallen. Ironically, thanks to its initial positive reception, The Mandalorian eventually assumed the same franchise position as the sequel films it was once compared to, which honestly might help to explain its growing negative reputation. It's been nearly 7 years since the release of the last Star Wars feature film, which means the Disney Plus streaming shows have been the only new content available for fans of this franchise in almost half a decade. So as the larger fanbase eventually transitioned to the Disney Plus content, it's only natural that the growing audience inevitably led to more critical attention. I imagine this trend will only continue as a standalone feature film exposes this series to an even wider audience, and I have no idea how they plan to handle the end of this series. I doubt the conclusion will be an improvement. Because as we've explored throughout this video, this series' quality has been unfortunately consistent since the very start of Season 1. Star Wars The Mandalorian was never good.